Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Go, Tim. How old can ghosts be? What actually is an out-of-body experience? When it comes to UFOs, what is so special about Socorro, New Mexico? Well, welcome to the 1015th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Coming to you from WOON AM and FM radio in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, on the Paranormal Radio app, from TalkStream Live and on YouTube. I'm Tim Swartz, sitting in for Ben today, and joining me for today's open line show are Paul.
Yeah, well, I'm here complete with my creepy voice.
Well, good to have you, Paul. And special guest co-host, Valerie Lofaso.
And we're all coming to the show via Skype today, so let's get to it. We're going to go with listener questions, and the first one comes from Emily in Connecticut. And Emily writes, "Hi, I just found you guys through some searching about Native American tribes closest to my parents' home in South Windsor. Their home is close to the river valley. The meadow leads right to it from their house. Their home is probably the oldest in the area, and I've recently been thinking about the energies there, especially in the basement. Have you heard from anyone with older homes with ancient paranormal spirits? I'm afraid there's something quite heavy in the basement. The house is 1698 and completely untouched in terms of structure. My father is an architect always focused on early New England preservation, so the house is an artifact in every way."
Well, I have to say that this is really weird because I grew up in that area, and I think I know that house.
Really?
So talk about a weird coincidence if you believe in such things. Ancient spirits, we believe it's more about time than dead people. I'm thinking of an experience that a lot of people report with First Nations people in the area. And in Great Britain, there are many examples of Roman soldiers and that sort of thing. Ancient monks that are seen. I myself witnessed an apparition in South Devon in 1989 in the Wistman's Wood, very odd place, was half a figure. The Wistman's Wood was a place where the Druids hid from the Romans. So that goes back a ways. So again, I think it's more about time than anything else. You're looking through intersect points in the multiverse, and you see other people who are dead here, not there. But you folks may have a different point of view. Valerie, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd love to chime in on this. For the listeners who aren't familiar with me, I am a medium, and my specialty is working with land. I tend to be very good at connecting with land and feeling what's going on there. And it's not uncommon to go into a basement of a structure, especially an old basement in an old structure, and feel a lot. And I personally think there's a lot of reasons for this. I don't disagree with what you were saying, Paul, but I think on top of it, you just have so much energy staying in that one place. You know, if that house hasn't moved in all that time, that's a lot of energy concentrating in that one location. Plus, in a basement, you don't have a lot of life happening down there. So it's easy for energy to get stagnant and just kind of hang out in that one area. You're also closer to the actual soil, the ground. So if there's been a battle there, if there's blood that's soaked into that land that is under the cement floor of the basement, it's possible to feel that when you're down there in the basement area. I've definitely encountered energies in similar situations where it definitely feels like it's been there for a very long time, whether it's something that ever had a human life or sometimes things that are just there for other reasons.
So do you have an example or two?
I recently did an investigation at a library here in New Hampshire it used to be an old schoolhouse, and now it's a library, and I believe it was built in the early to mid 1800s originally. And I picked up on a very similar thing in the basement. It just had really, really heavy, unwelcoming energy. Unfortunately, they had some children's area down in the basement, and I couldn't understand how they ever used it for happy-go-lucky children's crafts and things like that. It felt so unwelcoming in that basement. It felt like there had been some sort of bloodshed in the area, and one of the members of the team I was investigating with did some research and found out that not far away there had been a battle between the natives and the settlers in the area at one point. And there's also a lot of water nearby. There's a swamp and a stream, and that can, carry the energy to the other locations as well.
Yeah, this area in South Windsor is very, very wet and right near the Connecticut River. Tim, what say you?
Well, I think a lot of people are surprised. Now, this house, as the letter said, was built in 1698 and is completely untouched in terms of structures. But these sorts of energies, whether it be, depending on, how you look at these things, whether it would be actually discarnate spirits or, like glitches in space-time, people are surprised if they move into a new house and find it's haunted or some kind of odd activity is going on. And, so many times these types of hauntings aren't related to the structure, but from the land that they're built on, like Valerie was saying. So, you have this place built in, 1698, and, you just think about all of the lives, all of the people who have come and gone, in that house or in that general area. And, that kind of energy, depending on the circumstances, really does take a long time to dissipate. Now, Paul, you made a reference to there was a place in England, and I think you were referring to the one where the plumber was in the basement of this building. I think it was it was in London, wasn't it?
Near London.
Near London, right.
Oh, no, I thought it was in Yorkshire.
That could be.
There are several different examples.
The one that I'm thinking of was the one that he had dug a pretty deep trench in the basement to lay down some new pipes, and all of a sudden he heard a trumpet blare and proceeded to see the apparition of Roman soldiers going through that trench, and in fact, they were, he could only see their torsos on up. He couldn't see their legs. Their legs were still deeper than the trench that he had dug. So if he hadn't have dug that trench, he may never have seen anything. But, you could ask yourself, was this guy seeing apparitions, or was he seeing a look from the past, or was he looking at another reality where that past is a little bit, or quite a bit slower than our own, and he was seeing almost in like a real-time situation where Rome was still occupying Great Britain. So, I mean, you can see that in all kinds of different situations of reported haunted buildings or locations. So, and I kind of tend to think that it could be all of the above. I think that there is the possibility that you do have spirits of some kind, either human or the parasites that Paul talks about that at times like to take on the guise of humans, and as well there could actually be at certain power grid locations, kind of like an intermingling of this world and other realities.
One of the points of that case, I believe, was that he had uncovered a Roman road, an old Roman road, right?
Yes.
One point I'd like to hear from both of you on is something we bring up frequently when it comes to the number of ghost experiences that people report. If reincarnation is true, why are there so many ghosts? Assuming that whole classical thing is true.
That's a really interesting question and really hard to answer. I guess from what I've learned from talking with other mediums, working with spirits and hearing what they have to say and working with the living, doing readings, because time is not a thing on that other side, wherever that is, we can exist in multiple forms at multiple times. So why can't our spirit exist in multiple forms at multiple times? As a medium, I've experienced a situation where I'm on the phone with one of my aunts, and this is my dad's sister, and I can feel my dad's presence. He passed away many years ago. I can feel my dad's presence with me, but I also know that my dad is at that same time with his sister. He's existing with both of us because we're talking about him. We're reliving, happy times with him. So I think there's so much unknown about how it really actually works in the spirit world, whatever the spirit world is, and there's so many possibilities of conflicting worlds that, it could be us in another existence at the same time, really alive but not looking alive because of whatever crossover is happening.
Yeah, Tim?
Oh, yeah, well, I absolutely agree. I mean, you've heard spirit mediums talk about how the messages that they receive often state that time in the other realities doesn't exist. That it's basically a material world thing. So if that's the case, then I see it as reincarnation doesn't exist as we're thinking of it in the material world. It's not that we lived a past life, died, and now we're living in this one, and all the other past lives are gone. But we're actually living past lives, this life, future life, as well as lives in other realities, all at the same time. And I know that's a really difficult concept for a lot of people to put their heads about. But at the same time that you are living this life right now, at this very moment, you are living all the other lives in in the past and even the future. And I think this also extends to all the other realities that are out there. And there are times when at night you'll have regular dreams, and then you'll have those dreams where they seem all too real, and I wonder if you're not actually visiting, some of these other realities that you're living in at that very same time. Because, there are people and situations in those dreams that are so real and so emotional that when you wake up, you actually feel a sense of loss because you're not with the people that you had a history with in that dream. So, I think that, the way, due to the fact that, we are trapped in space-time in the material world, that the way that we look at how our souls, spirits, whatever you want to call them, exist in this universe is really, I mean, we've narrowed it down to just a little tiny bit, when it probably exists on almost maybe infinite scale, throughout all of reality.
We use the term super life to describe what you just described, Tim. All the subconscious lives, etc. Now the next question, at the risk of sounding like Inspector Clouseau, is one that only I can answer. So Valerie, what do we got?
Is that the one about the video feed?
Yes.
It says, why is the video feed not used on this channel?
Okay, that's the YouTube channel. And we get this question a lot. I always explain that it's a matter of rights. The WOON radio owns the rights to those videos. They are very available on the station website. We put the links all over the place, including with the audio feed, when they go to the podcast platform. So it's very available, and we just don't have the rights to put it on the YouTube channel. So that's it. But it's very available.
Okay. Do you want me to read the next question?
Yeah, it is more in the nature of a comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, but it actually, I think, relates back to something we were just talking about.
Yeah.
The commenter Benji5796 says, out of body isn't out of body, it's the mind projecting. Sam Parnia's AWARE study has also demonstrated this. And there's a note that Dr. Parnia is director of the Human Consciousness Project at the University of Southampton.
Yeah, I'm not sure which show this was in response to on the YouTube channel, but let's talk about out-of-the-body experiences. You think he's right, Tim?
Well, and it's like you said, I mean, this really does go back to what we were talking about previously, and the question is, out of body isn't out of body, it's the mind projecting. Well, what is the mind? I mean, that is the billion-dollar question that we and philosophers and scientists have been talking about for years and years. I mean, is the mind exclusive to the body? I mean, is the mind nothing more than just a series of chemical reactions in the brain, producing almost really a false image of self and self-awareness? Or is the mind, actually that eternal part of us that will continue on after this body, your body, my body, everybody's body, gives it up, and it goes on elsewhere. So, and possibly the question may also deal with the fact that mind projecting, he could be looking at it along the lines of, say, like remote viewing, where your mind doesn't really go anywhere, actually go to, physical locations or non-physical locations, and instead is just picking up information that is out there and available really for all of us if you know how to work it and make yourself open for that kind of information. But myself, I mean, my own personal opinion is that your mind, spirit, astral body, whatever you want to call it, is actually able to send itself to locations and in this reality and others. I mean, the old timers used to talk about the silver cord, that would keep yourself attached to your physical body, and you had to make sure that that was never severed or away that you go. But yeah, I mean, I think that the mind is capable of doing, say, like remote viewing, where there is no actual traveling of your essence. But there are people, say, like Robert Monroe, who seem to be, just really, really good at actually sending his essence to other locations, and to the point where he was able to make himself known to other people.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going to go with this, is astral projection. That's a common practice among a lot of intuitives, and there are several cases where an ethereal form of that person is visible by somebody else when they're traveling. They do it on purpose to see if it's possible, and Tim, you asked the same question that came to my mind when I read this statement, is what is the mind? We don't really know. And, are we sure that we're not leaving our body, whether it's during meditation, doing astral projection, doing remote viewing, or dreaming? I know as a very vivid dreamer myself, there are times when I wake up from a dream that does seem like I was in an alternate reality, and I feel like I was very actively there, not just in bed imagining this happening. I wake up exhausted from many dreams. Why is that? Was I really there? A lot of times I think maybe I was. So I'm not sure it's just the mind projecting. I'm not familiar with Dr. Parnia's work, but I'm kind of curious to maybe take a look at it now and see what it says.
The late D. Scott Rogo was a friend of mine, and at one point, the parapsychologist Keith Harari, whom I also knew, decided to project himself into Rogo's house at one point, and Scott actually saw him walking down the hallway when he wasn't there. So that's an example.
Yeah.
Right.
There are some people who go completely with the it's just your mind projecting hypothesis, and saying that your mind is powerful enough to actually put that image in somebody else's mind, that they think from that image that they're seeing you walking down the hallway when you're not actually physically there in a spirit sense, that it's just your mind being able to do that. But I don't know. I mean, that's almost like an Occam razor type thing, where that seems to be almost a convoluted explanation, rather than just saying that, well, they're able to send their essence, their spirit, whatever you want to call it, across the distances to be able to visit. And I can't think of the cases, but I know that there have been cases of people who have been able to astral project and do things to the physical world, leave something behind, move stuff around. And so again, unless, and that's always, it's always an explanation, as I'm talking about these things, Paul, all these different things come to my mind, and considering how powerful our minds can be, our telekinesis could also be a factor. So, it's hard to say sometimes.
Well, we'll take a brief break, halfway through the show here. You're listening to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, with our great friends Tim Swartz and Valerie LaFaso sitting in for bed today. We're doing open lines here on WON AM and FM radio. We'll be right back.
Community Care Alliance invites you to the return of an in-person shelter walk on Saturday, September 30th to raise critical funds for homelessness and homelessness prevention. Registration for the walk begins at 10 in the morning at Community Care Alliance's Nolan Building. That's at 800 Clinton Street, Woonsocket, in the parking lot, with the walk beginning at 10:30. For more information about the walk, visit this website, communitycareri.org.
Okay, there you have it. WON AM and FM, we're back with Behind the Paranormal. And I'm going to hit our two co-hosts with a question. Have you yourselves ever had an out-of-the-body experience? Let's start with Valerie.
Not in the traditional sense. Like I said, I'm a very vivid dreamer, and I do believe I've had experiences while sleeping where I leave my body and go somewhere else. Just the way I feel when I wake up, I don't know how else to explain it. But I have not had the more traditional kind of, I guess if there is a traditional kind of out-of-body experience. That's the extent for me. How about you, Tim?
Well, okay, not that I have been aware of. When I was younger, and I was a big fan of Robert Monroe's work and others, and made attempts to do astral projection, but was never successful. Now, I do have a story where I have had a friend that she was in the hospital at the time, and this has been a number of years ago, and I was unable to come and visit her. And one night, she said that I actually, and this was after business hours, so she was pretty surprised, that she said that I actually came in and talked to her briefly and then sat in the chair next to her bed until she fell asleep. And the next day when she, in the morning when she woke up, I wasn't there. Now, I know for a fact that I wasn't there. I was quite a distance away. That was one of the reasons that she was surprised that I actually managed to show up. But I have no recollection of this. So, I don't know if this was an actual case of astral projection, whether or not she was dreaming it. It's hard to say. I mean, at the time I was passionately wanting to be there and was frustrated because circumstances made it so I wasn't able to go and visit her. So it's hard to say. Who knows?
Well, the notion of remote viewing as related to out-of-the-body experiences came up on last week's show. We had Chris Harmon from MUFON, who was sort of jack of all trades and the paranormal master of all. And he teaches classes in remote viewing. So, and I've sat in on some of those. And he was saying a few things about that. But what do you feel is the relationship? In other words, how similar a process is it? OBEs and remote viewing. Tim?
Well, it's remote viewing has always been a fascination with mine. Partly because, once again, with a lot of this stuff, I've attempted it myself, and I've just always been frustratingly non-psychic. I tend sometimes to be like a vacuum when it comes to paranormal events. Because with the exception of a few very outstanding situations in my life, when I go to, say, like investigate haunted places or talk to people with abilities, nothing ever seems to happen when I'm there. And it's not like I'm going with like an uber skeptical attitude. I tend to be very open-minded, but it's myself. It just doesn't work. But and it's like I said in like a previous statement earlier in the show. I wonder sometimes about the differences between remote viewers and those who can astral project, because you have some of these people who they have more, as they call it, like, mental impressions, mental images, and then there are others who describe they describe themselves as being there. Now, whether or not it's just they're just trying to turn a phrase when they are talking about their almost overpowering impressions, but I know that there was one remote viewer who was sent to check out an area on the dark side of the moon, or the far side of the moon, actually, and he said that, and this was Ingo Swann, by the way, he said that while he was there, that the extraterrestrials or beings or humanoid-looking figures that he saw at this location became aware that he was there with them and looking at them, and he felt that he had to withdraw quickly or else he would be in danger. And his descriptions almost sound like that he was physically, in a non-physical form, there at that location, rather than just gathering information that was available to him, in a psychic sense. So, I think that there are some really talented remote viewers who are utilizing that hidden aspect that we have to be able to actually leave their body and go to a location, while others are, tapping into that, Akashic record type of thing, and then writing down the impressions that they get.
Valerie, further thoughts?
Yeah, from my own studies, my impression is that out-of-body experiences and remote viewing are different, mostly in the sense that out-of-body experiences tend to happen unplanned, whereas remote viewing is done with a specific intention in mind. But otherwise, I think from what I have read and experienced myself, they tend to be, fairly similar. I did some exercises in an intuitive class one time where we were given envelopes that had a location in it, and we had to go to that location intuitively. And for me, I always feel like I am there, not that I'm just seeing it in my mind. And I don't know if that's the empath part of me, putting myself in somebody's shoes or in a location, but it does feel very real to be in those places. We did another exercise where we had to visit the childhood home of the person sitting across from us. And we could easily say that, well, I'm just picking up on images from that person's mind. But, when you're doing it, you walk in the front door and you look around and you describe what you see and you feel like you're there. So based on my experience, I think they are similar, just different intentions.
We had Tom Dongo on the show 2 years ago. Tom is a researcher and remote viewer who lives near Sedona, Arizona, appropriately enough. And he was describing remote viewing and sort of projecting himself to a friend's house who was a very good cook. And he described smelling the tomato sauce. And I said, how do you smell anything when you don't have, you're without your body and your sense of smell. And he said, nobody's ever asked me that before. So, what do you think about that, Tim?
That's very interesting. I never thought about that before. And
too?
Yeah, and I don't know if I have heard that much along those lines with the other senses coming into play, besides mostly just this sight, because some reports of people who have become good at astral projecting often report that they can't hear at the locations. Now, some of the ones that have been really good at it are able to communicate with people that they run across, but that tends to be more of a telepathic type of communication. So yeah, I'm not sure myself. That is a good one, unless somehow they are tapping into the person that they are visiting, that they are tapping into their mind, and are smelling what they're smelling. So I mean that could be a possibility, but yeah, I think I need to look a little further into that one. That's a good one.
Hey, Valerie?
Yeah, that is a great question. I found that our senses are very much intertwined, especially when it comes to memories. And I mean, tomato sauce, I think, is a smell that a lot of people, I grew up in an Italian family, so the smell of tomato sauce, I immediately go to my Aunt Pat's kitchen in Queens, New York, and I can smell it. I know what that smells like even without having that smell here. So I kind of wonder if it's almost a memory smell, because you see it, you know what it is. You know what it's supposed to smell like, because we have these very vivid memories associated with things like that.
Something for us to ponder. Okay, why don't we go to the final question, because the next one is really a whole page. I think we don't have the time for it. So what's the question from Jeff's Game Box?
All right. Jeff says, what is so special about Socorro, New Mexico that seems to draw in UFO activity specifically? Just the nukes? Says Lonnie Zamora was not far from there, similar craft description, and not the only case there by far.
Yeah, Lonnie Zamora, a famous case of a police officer witnessing the landing of a craft and two entities. Timmy, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, the Socorro, New Mexico. Now, for people who aren't familiar with that one, that is the case where the Lonnie Zamora was a local policeman that when he was on patrol, he actually heard what he thought at first was an explosion. And when he went to this location just outside of town, he saw in a gully, and he wasn't that far away from it actually, what looked to be like a white egg-shaped craft that had landed, and there were two smallish, they weren't, like diminutive or child-sized, but two smallish individuals dressed all in white, walking around outside of this craft. Now, Lonnie had actually kind of like ducked down behind a rise and was, like peering up at them, and he must have made a noise or something, because all of a sudden these things scrambled back inside of the craft, and a flame came out from underneath it, and the craft lifted up, making a lot of noise, similar to the explosion that he thought he heard earlier, and it actually then flew over his head and and disappeared. This has become quite a famous case because Lonnie was very well respected in his community, and nobody had really any doubt that his story didn't actually happen. I mean, he was not prone to lying, and he swore up until the day that he passed away that it was an actual experience. And as well, there was some physical evidence left behind as well, some burning, I think it was sagebrush, some what appeared to be little scrapes of metal on the rocks, and indentations in the dirt where this thing had landed using I think it was like a tripod landing gear. But as for the question, why is this area seem to be a UFO hotspot? Well, New Mexico has been a UFO hotspot in general for a number of years. And, the person writing the question asks, it's because of the nukes or what have you. And, that's one of the things that has endlessly been debated. I don't think it's a coincidence, though, that the U.S. military activity in New Mexico, the early atomic bomb testings, you had the Roswell, New Mexico. At the time, it was the Army Air Force Base that had the only atomic weapons in the country located there in the late 1940s. So, whatever you think of as an explanation for the UFO phenomena, it doesn't seem to be a coincidence that wherever there is a heavy military presence, and especially using nuclear weapons, there tends to also be an increased amount of UFO activity. Now, some people would say, well, it's because UFOs are, black budget, top secret, man-made crafts. But considering a lot of these early cases, Roswell, Socorro, some of the others, it seems unlikely to me that the United States had managed to come up with those kinds of, super technology types of crafts at that time. So yeah, it's a good question. I mean, why is this a hotspot? And that's a big question.
Valerie, you're also a UFO researcher, so go for it.
Yeah, the nuclear thing definitely seems to have a correlation to high UFO activity. The area where I live, we have the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, we have the Pease Air Force Base, and you have the nuclear power plant, all, within just a few miles of each other. And there's a lot of UFO activity in this area. Is that the only reason there's UFO activity? I don't think so. But the motivation behind the visits is always the number one question. I mentioned earlier off the air the Exeter UFO Festival that happens on Labor Day weekend up in this area. That's because there's UFO activity in this area that it's a popular event. But that's always a top question to all of the researchers and speakers is why are they coming? Why are they visiting? And it's such a hard question to answer. I think we always want to know why. I don't know that we're ever going to get a definitive answer to this question. I hope if it does have to do with nuclear stuff that it's for a good reason, that they're trying to help us avoid disaster. That is speculation. I would like to think that other beings out there have our best interests at heart and would want to help us avoid things, if possible, that could go wrong. So that's my hope anyway.
One point about Socorro, that part of New Mexico, or I should say underneath the Socorro region, there is an enormous magma chamber and a huge example of the Bouguer anomaly, which we've talked about before. It's a gravitational anomaly that is present, so far as we've found, in every single major flap area that we've investigated. And what it does, it changes gravity as you walk closer, like down a hill toward a valley. You would expect gravity to get a little heavier because you're close to the center of the earth. But actually, when this anomaly is present, it gets lighter. And this is measurable. And oil and gas deposits are actually found using the Bouguer anomaly. So it's a fact, and it's practically applied. And why is this relevant? Well, what did Einstein say? Gravity affects space and time. So it is, we're still looking into this, but it's possible that with Socorro, as with so many of these other areas, space and time is easier to bend if you want to use it for travel, or if it's just spontaneous overwashes or intersect points. So that's just one thing to bear in mind.
You know, that's a good point there, Paul. And, you know, if you go and combine that then with some of the early atomic bomb tests that were going on in New Mexico, you know, that may, you know, some people have speculated that these tests actually ripped open a hole in space-time that allowed these things, you know, whatever they are, to come through.
So, Tim, let's take the last few minutes. Tell us about yourself, what you're working at, and where people can find out more about you.
Oh, sure. Well, you can find all of my books on Amazon.com. That's probably the best place. You just type in Tim R. Swartz, and they'll all come tumbling out for your reading pleasure, both as print and e-books. Our most recent book is called Mimics: The Others Among Us, and Paul has just an absolutely fantastic chapter, you know, in this book. So, you know, I highly recommend, just for Paul's chapter, that everyone go out and get themselves a copy. Now, my website is called conspiracyjournal.com. And anymore, the word conspiracy has taken on a bad term. I'd love to change it at this point, but I always say that you know, we look at UFOs and ghosts and cryptid creatures, and, you know, none of that political stuff.
You carry on the great tradition of Tim Beckley.
That's right. Practically, you know, all of my earlier books were published through Tim Beckley's Global Communication Interlight publications. Unfortunately, you know, he passed away a couple of years ago, so we're trying to carry on and keep his name out there for everyone.
He was one of our guest co-hosts too. Valerie, what's cooking with you?
I just released a couple books recently. I released the fourth book in my young adult paranormal fiction series. The series is called Tangled Web of Friends. It is available in print and an ebook on, well, the ebooks are in Nook and Kindle, and then you can find the books in print on any online bookseller. I also released a book that you can get only through me right now. It's called The Vital Empath, and it's a workbook for developing your intuition as an empath. I currently host 2 empath support groups for anybody that is an empath. You can find me on Facebook as Valerie Lofaso, author and empathic medium, if you'd like to know more about any of that.
Very good. And Valerie was a co-author of ours on a new book, Behind the Paranormal 3 Uneasy Skies. Do not give up hope. I intend to be working on that till the day I die. No matter how soon that will be, we plan to still be working on that. So we have in our last few minutes one question by email here that's come in from Phil in Savannah. Phil is a friend of the show. This is more to me, I guess. Paul, you've spoken about going to the good world. The good world is my name, and anybody who's read Behind the Paranormal 1, everything you know is wrong. There's an epilogue in there about this parallel world, I believe it is. That's very much something that Valerie described, visited in dreams, sometimes during meditation, and occasionally in waking life. And when we decided, Ben and I decided to reveal this, with some years ago, we were going to be on Coast to Coast to Ham that night. And I said, Ben, do you really want to talk about this? The whole country is going to be laughing at us. So we said, let's go for it. So we talked about the good world, which is, I wouldn't call it heaven, but it seems to be a very natural place for human beings to be. There's daily life. People work. It's very beautiful. There are modes of transportation. And there is, you can call it like the dream time that the Aboriginal people talk about, because you can communicate with everything. But in any case, I started to talk about this, and George Nuri said, I've never heard you this far out before. Well, I said, I don't think I've ever been this far out before. So in any case, that's what Phil is referring to. And he says, are you able to go there at will whenever you wish? No. What is the methodology? Again, meditation, etc. What is your job or purpose there? I seem to be some sort of researcher. I have a huge library at my disposal, as I do here, and that sort of thing. There are meetings, and when we did talk about this on Coast, we received over 3,000 emails, 2 of which were negative. Other people said they'd been there themselves. They described scenes that I did not describe, but that they had witnessed, and it was really quite moving. So apparently it's not just us is doing that. So in any case, if you have any comments, now's the time. Tim or Valerie?
I believe I've experienced a similar place in meditation before, where there's a more of a collective consciousness, so hurting each other is not a thing.
Yeah.
It's all about love and humanity and caring and doing the right thing. And it was very overwhelming and moving when I went there.
Parasites have no access.
Yeah.
Apparently, yeah. Okay. Well, let's go to our announcements. Tim, if you would.
Sure. The 2023 Western Connecticut UFO Conference, presented by the Danbury Library, will take place virtually and in person from October 22nd to October 29th. Events will begin on this show on October 22nd with special guest Reverend Michael Carter of Ancient Aliens with a live audience interaction. More information to come.
And the Greater New England UFO Bigfoot Conference is back. This will be a one-day event on November 19th at the Veterans Memorial Center in Leominster, Mass. Watch for more information. And you can visit the show website, behindtheparanormal.com, where you can find nearly 1,200 hours of regular shows and special broadcasts since 2008 from CBS Radio, Archive Radio, and here on WOON, AM and FM. Also, hear many of these broadcasts on the major podcast platforms, including iTunes, Apple Podcast, and YouTube.
Download our show app. It's free at BehindTheParanormal.com, and browse our books along with those of our guest co-hosts. Our website has a charity page with links to several good causes we have adopted, including Hope for Hilldale Cemetery in Haverhill, Massachusetts, USA, CARES, Canadian Veterans Advocacy, Helping Haiti's Orphans, and the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation of America, and the Sisterhood of Ground Zero.
So, Valerie, what's cooking for next week?
On October 1st, Paul and Ben will welcome researcher can you pronounce that? Rooney, there we go, for an update on weird doings in California.
Okay.
All right, well, we leave you today with a thought from none other than Albert Einstein. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. I'm Tim Swartz, sitting in for Ben Eno.
I'm Paul Eno.
And I'm Valerie LaFaso. Thank you for joining us on our great cosmic journey, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Paranormal.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.